Hello YouTube, Big Apple here with another video today about background checks. We'll go through the legality and whatnot and my opinion of them and how I believe they're supposed to function and what they're technically supposed to do. So start off, background checks, what are they for? Well, an NICS, which stands for National Instant Check System, call is made for every gun purchase at a dealer. And yes, this does include gun shows. So when you hear the constant talk about gun show loophole, there is no gun show loophole. What they mean is individuals that get together at a gun show that wish to purchase from each other, which is a private sale, is not conducted under a check. If you buy from one of the dealers at a gun show, you have to go through a check. I'll get into private sales later, but if you just use your brain and think about it, if some sketchy individual who looks like a thug, comes into a gun show and wants to buy a gun privately from someone, a regular person in their right mind probably isn't going to sell that person a gun, because that would be considered a straw purchase, and I will also cover that later. So there is no gun show loophole, and I will talk about what really is illegal and why those things happening at gun show are very unlikely, and why you never see crime at gun shows. The check scans through criminal records to determine the legality of the recipient of the firearm. So it checks, your criminal records and such, and if there's anything small as like a DUI or something, you could get delayed or you could get denied. And they have that check at every dealer you go to. So this includes like all big stores like Academy, Cabela's, Walmart. All of those places have an instant check system in place. So some have proposed to expand this to mentally ill, to where you could use your medical records, and I sort of agree with it. I understand we don't want individuals like Lanza getting his hands on guns, although he did kill his mother to get one, so obviously he was willing to kill anyway. But I kind of think it's a slippery slope, because eventually they may say, okay, well, if you're taking any antidepressants, you can't own a firearm anymore. And then eventually it may get to, well, if you have mild anxiety, you can't own a firearm anymore. And it just seems like it'd be a really slippery slope that would continue and continue, and I think that's a bad road to go down. But then again, I'm not a lawmaker, so I don't know what should be done. Something should be done about the mentally ill, I just don't know what. So these checks are largely successful, even though a criminal who fails a check isn't prosecuted. And I think they had a statistic online that said of the however many thousand background checks were done where a person who committed a crime tried to buy one, only 44 were prosecuted, which is a minuscule percentage compared to how many actually tried. So, unable to prosecute these guys. So that leads to my next question. Are more checks better? Well, Joe Biden already said live on television that they do not have enough time to prosecute these criminals who fail a check. So, what would adding 100 more checks do to help? I know they said they only want to expand them, make them universal, make them more intense, whatever. It doesn't matter how many times you check if you're checking the same thing. So what difference does that make if you can't even already enforce the laws on the books to prosecute these people that try to buy them? You can't make it any more illegal, It's an added burden on the law-abiding citizens, and I'll get to private sales later. So it doesn't matter if there are 100 checks in a 50-year waiting period. If someone has hate in his or her heart, this individual will find a way. And I can reference the Boston bombing. I mean, there were no firearms used in that at all. But they were able to, load up some explosives in a crowded area. And, that you saw the result. It was, it was catastrophic. It was awful. It's really shocking to me that human beings could actually do something like that and not feel remorse for it. I mean, that's just completely insane to me. But if someone has hate in their heart, they're going to find a way to do it. It doesn't matter if they have a gun or not. They'll find any tool. There are a lot of other tools. The black market is already extensive, so if somebody wanted to get a firearm and they knew they couldn't buy one, they could easily find one on the street. There's no way to enforce these individuals to do a check. So if this universal background check thing was supposed to go, basically drug dealer A who sells to drug dealer B on the street would have to go to a dealer to do background checks on them, and obviously both would fail. So how are they going to enforce that? What's the possible way that you can enforce that at all without burdening all law-abiding citizens? Because You know the criminals aren't going to follow the rules because that's why they're criminals. They don't follow laws. So universal background checks is a loaded name, just like the Affordable Care Act and like the No Child Left Behind program. They put a nice name, you know, kind of universally accepted name in there on purpose so that if you oppose it, you're seen as bad. Oh, are you against universal background checks? Yes, I am. Oh, so you're saying you want mentally ill people and psycho killers to have guns? No, that's not what I'm saying, and that's why they make the title that way. This is and universal background checks are only enforceable with national registration, and that is exactly what the NRA has said, but they continually think that there's actually a way to enforce it. The only way to enforce it is if they keep track of every single gun and there's a national database. And you know where that leads to? So, private sales. A private sale of a firearm is legal in many states. In Louisiana, if one individual wants to sell a hunting rifle to another, it's legal. And under current law, this transaction does not have to be under the thumb of the government. So why should you have to pay for permission to sell to another person? You shouldn't. That's the point. If the universal background checks thing was to go through, if a father wants to pass on a rifle to his son, he would have to go to a gun store and pay for permission for that to happen. And I know they have some exemptions in there or whatever, but it's a slippery slope. There's really no way for them to enforce that without a national registry, and I should be able to sell my property to one other person without having to have the thumb of the government over me. And now, what is a straw purchase? Well, a straw purchase is the legal purchase of a firearm to give to someone who cannot legally own a firearm, and it is already illegal. So if I went to the store and did a background check, passed it, and bought a handgun, and I went to sell it to drug dealer A on the street, that is illegal. You can't make it more illegal. It's unnecessary. It's a burden on taxpayers to enforce that and make you have to pay for permission. It's just ridiculous. So a lot of people are unfamiliar with gun laws anyway, and they don't realize already straw purchases are illegal. You can't just put the exact same law on the books without enforcing the original one. Straw purchases are already illegal. I cannot say that enough. A lot of people don't realize that. So, how many background checks does it take to predict the future? Well, the reason I say this is because the majority of criminals, like repeat offenders and stuff, get their guns through non-legal means. So they don't go through background checks anyway. But then again, you have the other category of the mass shooters, the guys who are pretty messed up in the head. And James Holmes passed background checks. So what is adding another one going to do? It's going to check for the same thing. It's going to find nothing. This guy isn't a criminal until he commits a criminal act. So how can a background check predict if someone is going to commit a criminal act or not? There is no way to predict that. It's impossible. A criminal is not a criminal until they commit a crime. So how many background checks does it take to predict the future? It's impossible. It's a burden on us. And universal background checks is a loaded name. Obviously, I'm against them, but hopefully you can make your own informed decision with this video talking about the real legalities. So, this is Big Apple. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments.